Hi, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well and paying close attention to how you're engaging with life. I wish everybody well. I have a few questions, and Ronnie doesn't want me too close to the screen, so there we go. Almost settled. There's one question, rather a couple of questions that Eddie from the UK asked about, and I'll try and cover them the best I can uh, relative to the way I think. As you know, when I'm talking about these things, um, it's so that you can try and perhaps consider some of the stuff that I'm talking about and see if it fits, and be curious and wonder why, if it doesn't fit, if there may be something that might help you broaden out your way of looking at things, or um, just help you to consider why I'm thinking this way and why this might be of value. It'll give you good practice or when you're engaging with other people and trying to be curious about why they think the way they do. It might even help you to attempt to understand why you think the way you do. Because in the journey that we have in relationship to moving towards higher states, what we're really basically doing is attempting to journey through ourselves and attempt to make sense of some of the ideas that we've already considered and the relationship that we have with those ideas. And at the same time, considering um, what might be or might not be helpful in broadening out some of these beliefs or ideas that we already have. Um, there is so much out there, as you probably realize by now, if you're truly interested in things spiritual. There are very deep things that are hard to understand. There are very, mm, mm, let's say, there are a number of things that kind of make some sense, and most of these things that are out there in books or what movies or whatever you might be watching or looking at or listening to, some of these things are basically relating to stuff that you've already heard and already believe, and tying some of this stuff together uh, is not very difficult because you already partially believe some of the stuff that's already there because it's been there for a long time, and you've run into it before. So you're trying to make a kind of sense of things overall. And all I'm trying to do is broaden the umbrella of the rubric that you engage with in relationship to how you see things. Um, no matter what anyone says, there's always more. There's always something broader. Yet, just because an individual considers something broader, it doesn't mean it's valid, or it doesn't mean it's invalid either. It just means it's another idea. The premise behind everything is gaining access to an inner perception that relates to energy so that you can begin to engage with the state or states that relate to more comforting, a more loving orientation, not necessarily an agreement orientation, but a loving orientation, or you can begin to engage with those chakras in a manner that supersedes the personality's dictates. Ultimately, it's not so simple for us because our whole engagement with life has been quite naturally focused on a kind of a sequential or linear process that relates to an arrangement within ourselves, kind of a personalization that decides what's valid and what's invalid. And that kind of logical orientation, I am sad to say, I might say, cannot actually perceive what is real in that energetic state. But it is a comforting mm, way of helping us to find a balance internally so that we can move slowly into an understanding that is just beyond, at any time, our capability. Um, we are creatures of habit. We are creatures that need to be valued and considered of worth. And we look for surface things to augment an assessment that we may come up with. We're great judges of how we think things are and how we think things aren't, and how others are and how others aren't. Unfortunately, we tend to do this more often than we tend to attempt to understand why a person does what they do. And then we automatically validate ourselves because we're assessing them to be somehow less than. You know, the argument of if you had an A in whatever it is you went to university for, you're much better than somebody who had an A minus or a B plus or a B minus. They could have had an off day. You might have had an on day. And to be honest, it's a bit superficial, but nonetheless, we use that as a measure. And we try to do these measuring things because they help us to feel more comforted and more of value than others. Thinking is not a requirement to be really able. Wow, what a statement. I would rather have said, our kind of logic doesn't always make sense of things the way that they are in terms of a reality that lies within. It doesn't matter. You will do what you do, and everyone will do what they do, relative to them, until they find out that they've decided that they no longer agree with themselves to some degree. And they will search to see that they can do something slightly different. Up until that point, you can budge them with a sledgehammer. Now, that in a way is really a positive thing. Maybe not, but look at it this way. If there is a slow movement, your validation quotients remain the way they were. You feel less vulnerable. You feel as if there's no negation involved with how you're functioning. There's no need to do anything other than what you already do. There's just somehow perhaps a movement into seeing what you already do. The slower the movement, the less judgment you may have towards yourself. You may learn as time goes on that less judging of yourself doesn't include not judging other people. Slowly, you may notice from time to time that you haven't been exactly perfectly right about how you thought. If you look back 10 years, you might notice a little bit better than looking back yesterday, perhaps. But in that moment, others are doing the same thing as you are. And there's no negation in that. They're trying to work their way through themselves. You're trying to work your way through you. This is not such an easy thing to do, meaning if there is a deeper relationship within you to a higher state, and it remains there in spite of what you do and how you think and what you think, in spite of you thinking that you're wrong all the time, in spite of you thinking that you're right all the time, in spite of you thinking that you're the only good, the only valid one, or in spite of you thinking you're not the only valid one. Now, I've talked about two extremes. In the middle, there's a tremendous amount of action, movement, all the time. Not paid as much attention to, but nonetheless there. In those moments, suddenly within the mind, sequential action is not as important. The logic of the personality already constructed is less important than a moment of seeing just what you're doing in that second. That small gap, and I've said this before, and you realize that small gap is such a help, because if you go looking for that gap gently and respectfully within yourself, it will help you to understand that a judgment of others from your perspective is elevating you because you need to be elevated. If you're not comforted. And that means there is a tremendous level of vulnerability involved with your relationship, with you as a personality in the life that you're living. Virtually everyone on the planet operates like this. When it's operating like that in individuals, they think that they're the only one on the planet that is validated like that, because they need to have that for that second or moment or year or lifetime. They are engaging with an understanding that is deeper than what they know. It's a dilemma. A guy named Carl Jung was a psychiatrist, I believe, if I'm not a psychodynamic individual, or had a relationship with Freud. Didn't always agree with him, but anyway, doesn't matter. The idea of a shadow was important to him in relationship to an engagement with the whole of the world, contributing to various planes. He was well aware of the Eastern indoctrination or way of seeing things, because he valued it and he knew that there was something in it. But it couldn't be exactly spoken about unless we kind of change something so that it could make kind of a Western sense of things. So we call this whole area of the astral or emotional disposition or mental disposition or personality orientations, very physical as well. There was a shadow aspect. In other words, everything wasn't good perfectly. Everything wasn't. There was a not so good part attached to it. Really, that comes out of the idea that every being on the planet, every single being on the planet, is engaged with all emotions. Sometimes you act out in a manner that you fully believe is the most perfect way to do so, and it is not very helpful, perhaps to a number of people, even one person, lots of people. That's not the point. The point is, it's not helpful to you. It's not helpful, in a way, to anyone. Wow, this is just too heavy for us to deal with. In other words, what I'm saying is, you contribute to the negativity that exists on this planet. As I do, as everyone else does, even your favorites. Now, to say that is not very nice. But there are responses in us that we use, and we call it really basically a practice. We practice the use of responding in a manner that in a moment is akin to how we're feeling, how we believe we should be, based on the images that we portray in our personalities, by the way. But none of that indicates perfection. But in a moment, you might consider it to be, oh, so right, or so wrong, or so this, or so that. That response is participating in a relationship with the shadow. It's huge. It's big. Oh my God. There are other interpretations of this, by the way. There are a number of people who have written some interesting books. Woodward is another. I don't think she's alive yet, but if people are really interested in this, you should take a look at it. After you've read everything on how life is, should be, all the rest of it, then realize that there is no perfection. You're just trying to work your way through and trying to understand in you how you are. And out of this, of course, has come a level of a concept called individuation and all kinds of stuff that you can read about. In terms of you become very able to function in the most appropriate way, relatively speaking. In fact, there's no perfection in this, but there are grades of engagement. Here we go with the grades of engagement. You are more valuable if you are like this. You are more valuable if you are like this. When you're relating to a higher state of consciousness, consider this one small little possibility. There is an act of love in you that is so profound, that is way beyond figuring it out. I, for one, have tried to figure this out for years, and it goes something like this. The love is so profoundly broad, and the love for you is so profoundly real, that you could do anything, and that love, would be there trying to help you to see how you function. without negation. No. Without negation. You'll do enough of that. Because I'm sorry to say, not perfectly loving beings all the time. We have it in us to be a loving being beyond belief, to be forgiving of others, ourselves even, maybe. To engage with a deeper level and profoundly be aware consciously of that deeper level. It can touch us. Yet when we are in our day-to-day, other things also touch us. The idea that I very much have experienced and believe in is that if you're around other people and they're frustrated, you can become frustrated. Even if you can't figure out what you're frustrated about. If you're around other people who are kind of happy for 10 or 15 minutes, you become happy for 10 or 15 minutes. Unless you have a very rigid way of looking at happiness, and that's not fair for them to be happy if you're not happy, and you hold on to not being happy. Of course, yes, you can do this. This is all part of the astral plane. It's very physical. It's even very mental. Also, very emotional. And it's tied deeply to images that we've constructed over the years into a patchwork quilt that we call personality. And this is a viable form or formula that we operate through. And what we're trying to do to some degree is realize consciously that energy comes through these valves or chakras or sephiroth or whatever you want to, fireballs, I don't care what you call them, flows through into us so we can learn how to use them to be helpful to us in our movement towards being conscious of not only the astral levels, but higher mental levels, our engagement with our bodies, the interaction between these four planes, the deeper levels of engagement with other states. There is enough in there to keep you curious and learning for lifetimes, which, by the way, seems to enter into this play. There's a dispositional display. What I mean by that is there are many people who act out in certain kinds of ways. It's a style. There's certain constructed levels of engagement that they believe they need to act like to be the thing that they have considered themselves to be. The form they consider themselves to be. That is a natural tendency for all of us. 8 billion people plus, maybe, God knows. Our dilemma is our sensitivity is profoundly strong to the protection of the style that we believe we need to keep. So one can say, I've read 457 books. Ooh, I've only read 43. The individual might think that other person is more able or better than they are. See, we go to the bottom rung to consider the upper rungs, where people have grown into our world and went to school to learn how to write. And from there, They went to a tree, sat and meditate, and gained access to higher states. We don't care about that. We should care about that. They became stalwarts of an engagement with high states into these lower planes. That was their job. There have a triple, quadruple numbers of PhDs in linking with higher states. No, none of those are negative all the way down the line. A PhD in ditch digging, I don't care what it is, just doesn't matter. What I'm talking about really is not PhDs. I'm talking about the levels that we engage, we talk about as more valid. Someone is more valid than somebody else. Of course, if I have a business and I need an accountant, I'm going to look for the best accountant I can find. Of course, that training is valuable to me, as it would be to anyone else in a business. The same is true of every other documented formula that we would use in our lives for the purpose of engaging with any state relevant to where we were working. But it does not stop us from moving into a direction through concepts into another state. There are ideas out there that relate to this idea, kind of. You cannot grow unless you go through trauma. Yeah, many people have written about it. I just don't happen to agree with it. Will you go through trauma? Of course you will. That's part of the nature of these planes. None of us get out of that one in our own way. And our definitions of traumas, various traumas, are different from one person to another. But is there a categorical relationship with trauma that means only that way you can grow? I don't agree with that. There is a loving that is hugely strong that can engage with those who never go through trauma very often, can engage with those who go through trauma, can engage with those who have a silver spoon in their mouth. This is a complicated system. One, if you were in the East, you would say, well, it depends on your karma, depends on your reincarnation sequence that you're moving through to get to the point where you can be used as a personality, as a tool for helping others to move past their rigidity of personalization, self-interest, so that they can begin to understand that the very least in the eyes of the matter world can be the very highest and the very most very able in the matter world to be the highest within that spiritual plane, become less identified with the personalization that they need to have in the past, they have needed to have to make sure that they feel comfortable with being what they are, and to realize that if they were not what they were, that they would still be linked with those higher states, or could well be linked with those higher states. If you have ever met people who are at that level, and I am not talking about those of us who give lectures and all that kind of thing. Many do not. Their ability to engage with energy moving through those chakras pull themselves away from interfering with that flow. And they are conscious of that flow and where it's going, and perhaps even why it's going there, although that will not matter very much to them. Then what you would come face to face with, if you could notice this consciously, is that another realization is afoot. The rules and regulations that we adhere to and believe must be there for us to make sense of things are often focused on these planes, so we can make sense of at least the attempts that we have to take a look at the possibility of higher states. And while we're there, those thoughts that we have and believe are real become real. And the emphasis we put on them validate others thinking they're real. And that works for everything. From the weakest thing of somebody selling a car on TV to somebody selling their great worth so we can go and vote for them. We are in tremendous learning modes. Reach out, reach in, learn best you can. Try not to negate the best you can. You will find it's really almost foolhardy. The reflexes are so fast. Then you don't have to agree with them. But maybe even if you do agree with them, you can allow yourself a little revision and a curiosity about how people think in the way they think, how you think the way you think, why you're considering that you need that validation. And it will be okay. You truly don't have to agree with anything or everything. Whatever I say, whatever you say, it's about curiosity, the wonderment of actually engaging with other states. Not because of your personal ability, but because you're open to allowing that actual occurrence for the purpose of helping others. Perhaps energetically, primarily, verbally, perhaps secondarily, maybe. I've been teaching for well over 40 years, and boy, one thing I know for sure, perfect words are, elusive to explain some of the things that I would like to be able to. And then I know for sure there's more, as you know for sure, in your day-to-day, looking back 10 years. You are not any longer like you were 10 years ago. If you are, ask the question, what's going on? Is that okay? Yeah. Is it okay not to be? Yeah. These planes are coarser planes, but they are not negative planes. They're undergoing shift and change, slowly, little by little. The shifting of these planes are relevant to us as individuals, but also the individuals that you are in your relationship with trying to understand deeper than perhaps yesterday is an aspect of opening up to broaden out the levels of higher state that can enter, the levels of curiosity, the levels of perception, conscious awareness. And I'm not talking about only the traditional ways of what would indicate this or that. There are so many levels beyond what we've already figured out. I think many of you have already figured that out. That's wonderful that you've even considered that possibility. Otherwise, you would be battling so hard never to take on another idea that would be different than the ones that you already have. We already do that in our personalities to some degree. Is that okay? Absolutely. It would be treachery to wake up tomorrow morning and not know who you were. Oh, your name, address, telephone number. It's happened. Not a very good thing to have happen in our world. It's called amnesia. At least that one version. We do not know ourselves very well, but we do the best we can with that. Lifetimes of living, we're trying to figure out this one. If we truly know another lifetime, we will recognize that in this one, we need to learn not to do something that we have noticed in the past one, because it will be shown that way. It's an act of love on that deep inner level that relates to all those lifetimes, pixels in the creation of those vortices that are opening enough to have different frequencies operate through them, different intensities, the courser to the infinite, and the capacity that we have of being okay with having that happen, and the vulnerability that we have within ourselves when we are attempting to do some things differently than we have done over the past years, which is not so simple. It's in every aspect of our existence. To do that is to help us to see better, little by little. We are still who we are. But seeing more, we begin to realize here's that cycle again, circling around, that others are transmitting energy into us and we are playing it through. And it is difficult not to, because we have been doing this all our lives and we do not know that we do this. One could say, if I don't know, it might be better. One could say, if I do know, then I know how certain things have happened in my life, perhaps reflexively. And I wondered about that after it was over. Not so happy with playing some of those things through. That makes that interaction a part of that shadow that Addie was questioning. That Carl Jung came up with because he was trying to make sense of an Eastern orientation of the interaction of everyone in our species upon us and our contribution to that engagement. Shadow The shadow is not only negative aspects from our perspective, it's an engagement with doing something that is not as relevant to helping us to internally link with higher states, because we become enamored with how to function in a certain way to declare our value so that others can hear it and know it. One state, or our disengagement with that way of doing things, so we do something in a counter way. As the old native Aboriginal background, where there was a contrary who used to ride a horse facing backward because didn't want to do anything in accordance with what anyone else was doing. Very interesting when you look at these things from a different perspective. Take 3 or 4 people who get together to have a discussion about something from different ways of seeing things. If the words are not perfect, the constructed system that we have, these wordings, there can be no agreement, even if they're all saying exactly the same thing. They will not notice it. Their focus will be on the words. Unless you believe this word and not your word, then we're not talking about the same thing. This is not real. This is a make-up story. It's a bedtime story we tell ourselves to be valued and be okay with ourselves. There's no negation in it. It's just what we do. Trying to understand a cosmos that is broader than the one that we put a ring around, and we can't step over that ring to engage with something that we cannot put a name on or allow it not to have a name. We live through experience. We live through our personalized experience. There's no, what would you call it? Once again, no negativity in that. It's all we know. Where it becomes a little not very genuine is that when we become unwilling to allow ourselves to be okay with listening beyond what we already understand to be true, to remain the way we were. This is a system that is utilized all over the world for all kinds of reasons. This system will be there for some time, probably, because it gives us a sense of, well, you could call it superiority, but a sense of value, changing that word, sense of value relative to what we've come up with. One tiny experience that changes that particular need, and you will begin to disidentify somewhat, not totally, somewhat, with what you believe has to be true for you to be more right than others. Ultimately, the experience itself gives you knowledge. The knowing is there, and you don't have to protect it. People naturally will not agree, and that's okay. But you can then learn to take a step back and realize that they have not ever experienced this. Why would they think it could be valid? Whatever this is. If you can learn not to hold that against them, then you are aligning with a sense of loving or compassion that inner loving has for you in allowing you to do what you do until you see through the lens of you. One could call it another level of mind or another level of, or a higher state of emotion or an actual physical perception of something beyond what you could notice before, and build that lens. Be open to making it a little bit bigger. This is not as easy as drawing circles in the air. But it is of value. You can do this mentally by attempting to broaden out, even by reading. If you have sensitivity at all, or a little bit, I don't care what it is, try and read something constructive for you, a little bit broader than your interest dictates you should read. Slow going, but it's just a tool to help you broaden out and recognize that after reading a bit of information, even though you didn't understand it at first, you begin to understand it by rereading. You're building a lens so that you can see what you're reading differently than you could before, because you couldn't see it very well before. So you had to react and judge it and devalue it. Therefore, you don't have to do that. We've all done this in various ways. But that is one way. Some of the energy exercises that we've been talking about for years, if done, will construct internally a perception different than even what you have today, even by continually doing them. Your willingness to be okay doing it and then trying to perceive what's going on in you and your engagement with others will slowly allow you to perceive internally, especially meditation, the energy that is operating in you and that may be able to move through you, and because of your intensity, operating from you in your personality struggles. I realize that this could be used for the benefit of another, of a person. More intensity, meaning they can get their way better. I think you have to struggle through that sometimes, effectively. But it's disarming to even notice yourself doing something like that. It's humiliating, actually, if it actually works. And if it isn't, you might need to be held in a place where it's very uncomfortable for you. God, I hope that's not true. Because you will be held in a place where you feel you're superior. And it'll be hard to break through it. Or inferior. And it'll be hard to break through it. Most of us have this in basic training. How do I live in this world? what is the right way to do things. You can't get it perfect. So you may already have trained yourself to be involved with that kind of relationship. You being the you that you are. Or be superior. Because you're trained to be that way. Somehow. You can't see then you in those circumstances. That is a part of the shadow orientation as well. So it's not always negative. It can be what one thinks is positive. May be truly not helpful to them. But it's not only about the individual. It's about the whole of the species and the shadow aspect of the species impacting on you, so that you will act out in the way that the species, predominantly those in the species, react and act out. This is a big idea by Cardio. Huge. I'm still not sure that people really truly understood this as much as he might have. He knew and could see that he was affected by this. That was one good thing about that. But he understood that everyone was. Their versions of self-validity. And he even set up a system where if one could really perceive this stuff, they could work through and become linked in, balanced inside to a very large degree. Not a lot said about it after that from my reading, but it would mean that the opening into other states could occur stronger if the individual could handle seeing more than they could actually allow themselves to see going through the process of individuation. I wish to thank Eddie for this question and to emphasize the realization that the business of judgment, right, wrong, good, bad, whatever, is actually part of the need that we have. Oh, yes, to make some sense of things, but I think ultimately the sense making that we have is to broaden our conscious awareness so that we can truly perceive the essence of existence of the individual's life functioning within as a reality, as a perception, as an experience. Many have had this occurrence and realized that they are truly a participant in the species, a participant in the species. They are a human being. Prior to that, they were classified as superior, more able than many others. The self-orientation was there so that they could do what they felt they needed to do to be valued and ask for more value than anyone else got. Eventually, they found out that they must value themselves, and they are always valued from a deeper state. Always, no matter what. Such loving, way beyond my capacity, but nonetheless, not beyond my theoretical engagement, perhaps. I wish you all well tonight. I think we're going to have a meditation now, and it'll be for about between 45 minutes and an hour, and we'll just need a couple of minutes to set it up. Thank you for your questions, everybody. I'll get to some others next Thursday. Thank you very much. And we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding on your own. And good night, everybody.